In this video, you'll learn about the Process Improvement Model PDCA, or Plan, Do, Check, Act. This model is great for making process improvements and problem-solving improvements to your business. I'm one of the owners here at Mango, and I've sort of been doing some of this business improvement, quality improvement stuff for about 30 odd years. Technique we're about to go through today, I've been doing for a long time as well. And you'll see some noticeable similarities with another model called the Joiner 7-step process for improvement. I have relied very heavily on this book, the Memory Jogger 2. This is about the 1990 version, and I still refer to it. It's still available on Gold QPC. It's gone through various revisions and it's still around, but Memory Jogger 2 is a fantastic tool for you to use. I highly recommend that you buy that. Okay, so you would have all recognized the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle based on the Deming cycle of business improvement. You would have seen over the years that the ISO standards have their framework has been built around the Plan, Do, Check, Act. So when you look at the standards there's planning, there's the do section, there's the check section, the monitoring, and then the act on that. Quality standards, health and safety standards now based on Plan, Do, Check, Act. So let's just get into this in detail. So when you start with the plan section. And from my experience when I've done this over the years, is the plan is probably about 75, I estimate about 75% of the time and effort is just done in the planning stage. And then maybe another 10% is done in the do stage, and then the rest is done in the check and the act. But most of the effort that we're going to talk about today is around the planning. So we'll go into detail around that. So in the first part of the plan stage, you've got to select a problem or a process that you want addressed, a problem area that needs to be improved, or a process that needs to be approved. So you're looking at sort of things that have happened in your business, some business indicators that may have changed. You're getting more customer complaints, or the deliveries are late, or some area of the organisation, there's some bottlenecks happening. So you've got to sort of look and find these areas. Best place to look is where some of your business indicators, your KPIs, are showing some changes. Then you assemble a team to look at improving that. You look at the data and you create an improvement statement. So the tools that you use there, you use some brainstorming tools, you get some check sheets together to measure and look at the data, maybe some control charts you can create, some histograms. Pareto and run charts are probably my two favorite ones. And we'll look at an example right now where you can actually do this. So this is a particular company called Pizza Planet. So they're a pizza delivery organization in America that experienced 6 months of decline after a period of very rapid growth. So the company was going really well, but after a period of time, it then had about 6 months of decline. A team was put together within Pizza Planet to investigate what's going on here, create a plan and make improvements. And so what they did is they started to get, so the first thing you do obviously is you collect the data. Here's a run chart. It's very basic stuff. Over a year period, you can see from January through to July, the unit volume, so the number of deliveries made for pizzas grew really well. So, you know, by July, they were delivering 2,400 pizzas. But in the next sort of 6 months, from July through to December, the number of deliveries dropped off. So something's happened here. Something's changed. What's changed to that business? So you need to recognize that. So that's a run chart telling you something's changed. Then you look at Pareto. So they went further into the analysis and looked at what were the reasons why customers were experiencing issues. Why was this drop off happening? Pretty much over from October to December, the last 3 months, customers were complaining of late deliveries. So vast majority of the issues was to do with late deliveries. So obviously that drop off may have been caused by late deliveries. And then they went a bit further, collected more data and Paretoed it again, and they found out within the late deliveries they were occurring mostly on Fridays and Saturdays. So late deliveries, Fridays and Saturdays, is pretty obvious. Most people eat pizzas at the weekends or get them delivered over the weekends. So there's some data for them to say, right, there's a real issue here. Late deliveries is causing us a great deal of problems. So now's the time you put in an improvement statement. So their improvement statement was they wanted to reduce late deliveries on Fridays and a Saturday. So that's the first part of the plan stage. You know, there's problems there with late deliveries. So now you get into you describe your current process, and what you do there is you brainstorm. You pull out your flow charting packages and you start, or your tree diagram packages, and you start to create flow charts of the processes that you're analysing. And you look and you study the processes from the start of the process through to the end. So work out where the scope of it is, and you analyse those things, and you look into it, and you see maybe there might be some areas that might need improvement. There might be some throttle areas where things are getting throttled and not going through at a great rate of knots, or things are getting held back and things are being held, or there's wait times and things like that. So you start to get into detail on the flow charts. So let's go back to the example. What did they do? So they looked at the process from receiving an order, they prepare the ingredients, bake the pizza, assemble the order, deliver it, get the payment, and then they return back to the shop. And in this particular instance, the team looked at it, and the late delivery purely wasn't because of delivering the order. The whole process from start to finish, there were problems all the way through there. So that's just a simple flow chart. You can go into great more detail if you wanted to see where the wait times are or where there's waste happening. So you map out the process, but in this particular instance, they found that the whole process was causing late deliveries. That's step 2. Now you're up to step 3. Step 3 is now you're starting to look at possible causes and maybe agree on some root causes. So this is mostly when you're doing process improvement, most organisations jump straight to causes and root causes right from the start. So you actually have to go through step 1 and step 2 before you start to do that, just to hold yourself back, get your data going, get your team together, map out the process, then you start looking at possible causes. Part of step 3, you're gathering your facts, and you're, as a team, looking at and you're garnering opinions from the team on potential causes of why there are late deliveries. You confirm those opinions with some data. So you actually get into the system, you get into the process, and you start gathering some data on the causes, and so the ideal ones here are brainstorming, but the one we're really going to focus in on is the cause and effect fishbone diagram, which I think is one of the best tools for looking at and analysing causes and root causes. And in this, let's go back to the example again. And here's the example with some causes that they've brainstormed. At the head of the fishbone diagram, the head there has got the late pizza deliveries on Fridays and Saturdays. So that's the effect. So you put that at the end, and then you put arrows with machine and equipment, people, methods, and materials as sort of the bones, and then you go into each of the areas, say for example materials, and you're looking at causes of why things are late, running out of ingredients, there's poor use of space, there's inaccurate ordering of ingredients, and then highlighted there is high turnover of staff and maybe some lack of training. So staff making the pizzas or delivering the pizzas or whatever, maybe they aren't well skilled and they lack training. So when the team looked at it, they could see some commonalities across all the areas there, and I've highlighted them in yellow for you so you could pick them out as well. So they were having in this particular pizza place, they were having a high turnover of staff, was causing major problems. And inside of that, the level of training or the lack of training was also a real problem. And they decided to measure. So this is where you start to measure the turnover. So in that same time period from January to December, they looked at the turnover of staff. So turnover back in January was 30%. And by the end of the year, it was up to over 60% turnover of staff. So, people coming and going pretty quickly. So knowledge was being lost, and the new people coming on board weren't up to speed. Because as you can see there in the second run chart, how many hours of training, the average training hours for a new employee. It started out as 12, and by the end of December, they were only getting 5 hours of training. So, these were the major causes that they felt that if they resolve that, then they could improve it. So, you're coming up with causes, and with those causes, you're actually backing those causes up with data. It's just not, when you're brainstorming these things, you're going to be coming up with opinions. But once you've got that opinion, then you back that opinion up with data. If you can't back it up with data, then it's just an opinion. So you want to start tracking some of this stuff when you've got opinions in play. Step 4 is the last step of the plan part of the plan. Is now you develop your solutions and an action plan. You define the solution. What are you going to do? You then plan to put that in place. So you plan the change. You set some targets, and then you monitor the results. So the tools you use here are the brainstorming, there's flowcharts. Now we're starting to use Gantt charts, prioritization matrices, and tree diagrams. And we'll have a look at some of these now. Step 4 is now you're starting to put in the solutions. And in that solution, you've got to actually put in a plan to make the change so that things do change over time. So here's a tree diagram of looking at reducing turnover through training all facets of the operation. The tree diagram splits off into deliver the training conveniently and then deliver the training effectively. So let's look at the convenience. So when are you going to do that? At a convenient time and at a convenient location. So before, during, and after shifts, at the shop, or you could train people at their homes. And then the effectiveness of the training. So will you how effective will the training be done? How you're going to hold the trainees' interest. You're going to improve their performance. So what are you going to do? You're going to develop videos, texts, role play, evaluating each other. There could be buddy training. There's all sorts of different ones there you could use. So that's a tree diagram where you get tree diagrams help you split out things you want to achieve into manageable tasks, so that you can work out what tasks you want to do as part of the solution. That's what a tree diagram does. Here's a prioritization matrix. It's a little bit complicated, but the memory jogger goes into a bit of detail telling you how you can do this. And this is where you sit down as a team and you work out what's the best training method that you can use to train your staff based on efficiency, feasibility, time, and cost versus the various ways of training staff, and you're trying to find something with the highest total, which say could be whatever it is. Setting clear performance objectives is probably the first thing you want. They're going to develop some videos, training at the shop, train before shifts. So that's how they're going to do the training. A prioritization matrix just helps you prioritize the activities that you're going to do to be able to implement the solution. And then you can use a Gantt chart that also gets mixed up with a sort of a responsibilities matrix. Here's the Gantt chart of when they're going to train the staff. So they're going to train at the shop before the shift. They're going to develop videos. They're going to use role play. They're going to evaluate each other, use pre and post testing, and setting clear performance standards. So the first 4 columns say who's going to do that, and then the January, February, March, and April, those are the time frames when they're actually going to implement those tasks. So it sort of flows from the tree diagram through the prioritization matrix, then into the matrix and Gantt chart. to say that's how that particular thing is going to be implemented. So as part of step 4, now you set in the target. The current turnover of staff is 62%. We want to reduce that down to 30% turnover of staff. Reduce the time for delivery from 40 minutes down to 25 minutes. We're going to reduce customer complaints by 50%, and we're going to increase the volume, so they want to go for 2,400 pizzas. So those are the targets that you set up in the plan stage, because you later on, as you do the checking and monitoring, you're going to check to see whether you achieve those targets. So the first improvement statement was they just want to reduce late deliveries. Now you're getting into targets that are specific to some of the causes that are causing some of the issue. Okay, so now we've finished on the plan stage, so there's 75% of the work. Now we're back into, let's implement what we've just done. So we're going to implement the plans that we've just written down, and you may want to pilot the solution. So you may want to start in a particular department, or then you follow the plan and then you monitor some milestones over the period of time, because you've got those targets in play. The tools you're going to use here are flowcharts, Gantt charts, tree diagrams, run charts, check sheets, and histograms. So now you've now implemented those things, and you're now up to checking to see how you're going. You're going to review and evaluate your results. You're going to confirm the measures. So were they valid? So some of those measures around late deliveries and customer complaints, are they valid? Are they achievable? Can you actually achieve those? So you want to be confirming those. Is the solution working? And you also want to be looking at any unintended consequences. So if you put in some of those actions, what were the unintended consequences? Did some of those actions actually affect other parts of the organisation? The Pareto of before, this was the 3 months before the solutions were put in place across 6 shops. They had about 1,700 late deliveries. 3 months, May to July in the following year, they had around 700. So they dropped by at least 1,000 late deliveries. And then, as you see previously, wrong order, the cold food, taste wasn't good. Well, some new ones have now appeared, is that people were complaining about the selection of the pizzas. So maybe the selection was not up to scratch. So other issues are now coming in, and you may want to start looking at some solutions why the selection of pizzas isn't up to scratch, and maybe the taste isn't good. So maybe they need to look at the flavours that have been added to the pizzas and things like that. So you get that over, there may be some unintended consequences have happened because of those solutions have been put in place. Now suddenly people are complaining about the selection. So there's something that wasn't expected at the time. So what happened in the end is, over time, the turnover of staff reduced from 62% down to 44%. Their target was 30%. They didn't quite meet it, but they're carrying on to try and still target that 30%. Average time from order, remember, it was up around 45 minutes. It's now down to 28 minutes from time to from receiving the order through to delivering the order. They wanted to reduce the customer complaints by, target was 50%, they achieved 52% reduction in customer complaints, and the monthly volume was increased to 2250. They didn't quite meet their target. Here are the run charts now. So you would have seen, the turnover peaked at 62%, now back down. The run chart's showing it's now back down to 44%. And the delivery, remember, it was up over 45 minutes. It's now down to 28 minutes. So that's the run chart, easy enough to create for showing improvements. Hopefully you can see this stuff's pretty simple. It's just, you just need to be organized, logical, and follow these steps. So step 7, so this is the final step, is the act. So you look at the learnings, you learn from the results of what you've done, any more recommendations that could come from that. So for example, the selection there was starting to become a high. The selection of pizzas was a high number there. So you may want to recommend that you put a team together and look at improving the quality or quantity of or the selection of pizzas. Increase the menu, decrease the menu. You need to look at what you need to do there to get improvement there, so you don't have so many complaints about the selection of pizzas. You want to continue with your improvement, and once those are in place, then you standardize those so that you have standard approaches for training new staff. So you train them before the shift, make sure that they get paid appropriately, make sure that management are available to provide that training, and make that as a standardized process, so that as the company grows again and keeps growing, then those things are standardized, and it's just the way that they do business, so they don't fall back to where they were before. And obviously you celebrate. And so the tools there, brainstorming ideas, you can storyboard it, and have that as a story that you can tell new staff when they start. So hopefully you can see there's the Plan, Do, Check, Act is pretty straightforward. There's 7 stages inside of those Plan, Do, Check, Act. Most of the planning and most of the effort is around that planning stage, working out where you are, what you want to achieve, putting in some root cause analysis, and then putting in some solutions. All of that plan stage is absolutely crucial, because that's where 75% of your time you're going to spend doing that. Then the do, that you implement those things, get comments back from people, and then you put in the check to see, well, how are we going against those targets that we set, and then, are there any unforeseen circumstances come through? Evaluate how you're going, and then finally you want to act on the findings, act on the results that you've got, and recommend further changes and standardise that, and then maybe celebrate the finding. And that's it. That's the model. It's very simple, very straightforward. There's no reason why you can't implement that into your business. I highly recommend getting that memory jogger book. All of those tools that I talked about there are in the memory jogger, and they give you a ton of examples. The new memory jogger's got other examples you can use there to train your staff. Highly recommend you get out there, get doing business improvement, use the PDCA cycle. As I say, very similar to the joiner 7-step process as well, which NZOQ do as part of their training for quality professionals, and they do that as part of their projects for their certificates in quality assurance and diplomas and whatnot. So I don't think there's anything holding you back being able to do any business improvements now.
If you enjoyed that video, why not click on this link here to view other business improvement webinars.